few minutes in, we pick up ace-queen offsuit in middle position, onto the gun +1, raises to 20. He seems to be a tighter player, and he's opening from early position. His range is going to be narrow, so I don't want to 3-bet. I call, the button calls, the small blind also calls. 4 of us see the flop. It's ace-10-5 with 2 spades. The small blind checks, under the gun +1, bets 40. I call, the button folds, the small blind calls. 3 of us see the turn. It's the jack of spades. The opponents both check. Seems that the under the gun +1 player is worried about something. Most likely would have bet again if he had 2 pair or better hand. My hand could be best. I don't want to give anyone a free card. I bet 105 to deny equity from hands like queen jack, king jack, and hands I'm beating containing a spade. Betting also allows me to take control of the pot. This gives me more options on the river than if I check right now. Small blind folds, under the gun +1 calls. Seems like he may have either ace king or maybe ace queen too. Potentially a worse hand like kings or queens with a spade, but probably not. The river is another 5. The opponent checks. I really believe he has ace king or we're chopping. This is a rare instance when I consider turning a hand with a decent amount of value into a bluff. If I fire for 350 or more, it'd be incredibly difficult for him to call with ace king. If I can get him to fold ace queen, that'll earn me an extra 200 by avoiding a chop. You basically just have a bluff catcher with those holdings. Betting the turn opened up some doors for me to make a move here, since if I bet big on the river, it'd be the exact same line I take with a hand like a flush, straight, ace jack, potentially pocket tens, and ace 10 too. I just can't get myself to pull the trigger. I check back, go little baby, and call out his hand before he turns it over.
Ace king's good. Just ace queen. Nice.
Things are looking up for us. We pick up pocket jacks in the big blind. It's a straddle pot. Folds to me, and I raise to 35. The under the gun straddler calls. We're heads up. The flop comes 9-6 deuce rainbow. I like it. I announce a bet of 40, and the opponent gets his chips out there before mine even hit the felt. I don't actually take that as a sign of strength. If he had a set, he'd probably take his time to consider his options. He shouldn't have an overpair higher than mine, and there aren't any 2-pair hands that make much sense. He probably has a hand like pocket 8s, maybe 8-7, or another pair of some sort. The turn is a king. It looks like a scary card, but it's not too bad considering the range I put my opponent on. It's possible that I'm up against king 9, or potentially the straddler floated my flop bet with 2 overs and now has me beat. Still, I'm going to be ahead the majority of the time, so I need to keep betting. I make it 80. Again, the player calls quickly. I'm beginning to be concerned. The river is another king. That's a good card because it's much less likely that the straddler is holding one in his hand. If the opponent has a 9, he should be calling a river bet. I bet 175 to make it look like a bluff. Then something unexpected happens. Well, this isn't great.
Chip king 9.
I don't beat anything that he's representing. For some reason, I think I have to call 300 more, but it's actually only 300 total, so it's 125 more to me. That ends up working out well in my favor.
Can't really call this. You win it. King, nice end.
What'd you call the flop with?
Backdoor flush.
That's another rough run out for us. Next I pick up ace queen of spades in the small blind. Under the gun +1 opens to 15. The hijack calls. I could either fold or 3-bet. I go with the 3-bet to 70. The big blind 4-bet jams for 289 total. Folds back to me. I figure I'm beat, but it's not that much more. I'm getting almost 2-1 on a call, so I need to win this around 35% of the time to break even. Even if I'm up against ace king, kings, or queens, I'll have nearly that much in equity. If he has jacks and 10s in his range, then I'll be getting the right price to call, and if he's ever bluffing in this spot or even has ace queen, then I'll certainly need to be calling. As long as the opponent doesn't have aces, I'll be fine. There's only 3 possible combinations of that. I do make the call. We get some bad news.
Aces are good. It's gonna be tough for me to win.
The flop is 9-8-5 with 1 spade, so we're not in great shape, but we got some backdoor draws. The turn is the king of spades. We might be able to do this. The river is not a spade. We don't crack aces today.
Nice hand, nice hand.
We're stuck around 600, but I'm feeling okay because I get a mug root beer from an old friend. In this one, I pick up pocket aces in middle position. I don't see it's a straddle, and I open to 15. 2 players call. The big blind 3-bets to 90. This is very good news. I put in the 4-bet to 250. The other 2 players fold. The big blind makes the call. It's a big pot. We're heads up and in position. Flop comes 9-6-3 with 2 clubs. The big blind checks. This shouldn't have improved my opponent. I down bet to 200 because I want to try to keep the ace-king type of hands in. Should still be easy to get all the chips in too if I happen to be up against kings or queens. We end up not getting a call out of him. He folds. We win the pot. Later the player would tell me he had ace-king offsuit. The last table of the night would pick up king-queen suited under the gun and raise to 15. The hijack 3-bets to 55. The big blind cold calls. I'm getting a good price for the hand that should have a reasonable amount of equity. I call. 3 of us see the flop. It's 10-7 deuce rainbow with 1 diamond. We have 2 overs and some backdoor draws. The big blind checks. I check. The hijack bets 75. The big blind calls. It's a small bet we're facing. Once again, I'm getting a good price. I've got a hand with sneaky potential. I call as well. The turn is a queen. We've got top pair and a good kicker. The big blind checks. I check. The hijack fires again, this time for 155. The big blind folds. I'm not going to be laying this down, although I don't feel great about it. I make the call. We're heads up. The river's an ace. This is a terrible card. I check. Probably won't be calling if I face a big bet. Luckily, the opponent checks behind. We turn over king queen. It's the best hand. I have no clue what the hijack might have had, but for the first time tonight, we have more money than we came into the casino with. We then pick up pocket jacks in the cutoff and open to 15. The button calls, as does a small blind. His name is Larry, aka Play-Doh Poker. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It's 7-7-5 rainbow. Great flop for our hand. The small blind checks. I bet 25 to deny equity from anyone holding overcards. The button folds. The small blind calls. The turn is a magical card. It's the jack of spades. We make a boat and have the second best possible hand. The small blind checks. I bet 55. The opponent calls again. And now it really seems like he may have a 7 or even pocket 5s. The pot could get big here. The river is a queen. This doesn't really change anything. If the small blind had queens, then he would have 3-bet pre-flop. Happy to see that he gets out chips and leads for 80. I imagine he's relatively strong and won't fold trips to a large raise, so I make it 375. It's nearly 5 times larger than the initial bet. The small blind has a big decision to make. That's by far our largest pot of the night. We got off to a slow start, but things are rolling now. We're up more than 600. In the last hand we'll go over, we've got pocket kings, under the gun +2, and a straddle pot. Under the gun +1 opens to 35. I put in a 3-bet to 105. This looked extremely strong, given that I'm raising a bet from early position. The button, who's a straddler, calls. I don't know much about him, but he should have a narrow range consisting of hands like ace-king, queens, jacks, or 10s. The under the gun +1 player also calls. He should have a range that's similar, but maybe have a few more pocket pairs like 9s, 8s, and 7s. 3 of us are seeing the flop. It's 10-8 deuce with 2 spades. Under the gun +1 checks. I'm not sure what I want to do. The problem with betting is that I'll never have a set on this board, so my hand is capped at 1 pair. Both my opponents could easily have a set of 10s, and maybe the under the gun +1 player could have a set of 8s. They could also bluff raise me if I bet, knowing that I'll never have 2 pair or better myself. I ultimately check, thinking that if the button has jacks or queens, he's going to bet anyway, and if he has a set, I don't want to bet into him. The button does fire. He makes it 120. Under the gun +1 folds. I make the call. It's heads up. The turn is the jack of spades. This is a terrible card. The flush draw gets there, and I'm losing to jacks now too. I check. The opponent bets 180. I'm not liking this very much, but once again, I feel like I can't fold. I call one more time, not even knowing what card I want to see on the river other than maybe the king of clubs. It's not what it is. It's the queen of clubs. We have essentially the worst hand that we'll ever have in this situation. I check. The button fires a 3rd bullet for 370. I legitimately can't see how I could ever be winning.
I don't think there's anything I beat, man. Nice hand up fold.
Solo bluff?
How much you bet?
No bluff.
No bluff? You want to show the vlog then?
Huh?
You want to show the vlog? 6-7, nice hand.
No bluff, no bluff. Just 7-9.
The opponent called 105 pre-flop with 7-6 offsuit, flopped a gut shot straight draw, and essentially got the best run out ever for exactly what I had, and ends up bluffing me big time. Probably the worst I've gotten bluffed on the vlog. It hurt.